Look at you guys. Look at you guys.
Good
Hello,
morning.
Dini.
Morning, Michelle.
Is he there?
It was.
It was.
Are we started or do we have to sign off and come back in?
No, seems good.
Okay.
I think we're all here. Well, at least we are here. I talked to Mark briefly earlier, so he stepped out for a reason.
Michelle, hello.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
Very happy that you're here.
Same, yeah. It's calming down here, so I thought can afford it to step back in and say hi. How's it been going?
Very
Where are
much.
you living? Where exactly are you living right now?
I'm still in Bremen, Germany, northern
Okay.
part of Germany. Looking into
Yeah.
moving later this year, but that depends on the new position. So let's see.
Well, I know you finished your PhD, and so I was wondering if you had picked up a job, if you're moving, and what your next steps are.
I'm trying to figure that out, yeah. So we're looking for jobs now. My partner is defending his thesis tomorrow. We're both seeking for yeah, new
That's great.
opportunity somewhere.
Well,
Let's see where
that's exciting. My husband and I finished at the same time too, and we had to take jobs 6.5 hours away from each other and commute. Did
great.
that for 3 years. Good
Well,
morning,
just
Mark.
wonder, dare I ask, because that's what we're afraid of.
Yeah, we did it for we did it for 3 years, and then he finally
Yeah.
just said to hell with it, and he gave up his job and moved to Dallas. And
Hmm.
then here we are now together in the same program. So it takes a while.
Nice. Yeah. Let's see how well it aligns.
Yeah.
So,
Mark, we got our notice about the paper, so that's good.
no surprise since it was Mark finished.
Yes, in a different hat. That was me because I did the. That's a story for another day. It's that moving between different systems. So easy chairs to taps turns out to be a real veil of tears.
Well, I thought it went smoothly. So thank you for all the work you've done on it.
And
We
you'll
have a
saw
little
I put a few more. I put a few more refs in as well.
I made a few tweaks this weekend. The other thing is that I want to get that video recording done, and I guess we just embed that in a text as a hyperlink.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, we'll just use a URL because obviously we can't embed it actually in the PDF, but that's fine. But I think that's nice to do. We didn't really have a firm idea earlier, and we can do it now, and so I don't think that's controversial.
Yeah. Well, we were trying to figure out if we even wanted to put photos or images, which I'm glad we did.
I think I mean we could if there's something else we think is compelling, we've probably got room to put another photo in it. Sort of excites people, but I wouldn't sweat it. I mean,
Well, one thing I'd like to add, and I'll work with Andrew on this, is they wanted to know more about the tech. So I think we should add a little bit about the code. Like
yeah,
he's building it with WebXR, but this means he's using this, and this, and it connects to blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think we're going to give a
yeah,
paragraph at least on process.
yeah. And as
But
long as it doesn't go over 2 pages before the references start, then we're fine.
yeah, we have plenty. I think we have like this much space.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a lot of words.
The weird thing is with LaTeX is the way it does its print algorithm. You think you have lots of room, and you change one word, and suddenly it's a whole page long. Now, really, because you can't. And it's that's the difference between sort of doing it in Word. You have to take a completely different word to when you're trying to finagle page lengths.
Yeah.
Anywho, story for another day.
And Frode, I finished a draft for the Future of Text book this weekend too. It was nice to have 4 days to think and write. I mean, I literally spent all day Saturday writing. It was so good. It felt so good to not have lots of little things to do. And I also worked on the food order for the conference, for the symposium.
Fantastic.
So I got lots of things done, but I did it in a real casual way because it was the 4th of July weekend. Hey, Andrew, good morning, dear.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, morning.
Hello. Hello.
I think like 3 or 4 USBs went out on the back of my computer, so my webcam's dead. I'm trying to find a working port. I'll be with you guys visibly in just a moment.
Cool,
Can you
cool.
use the Macintosh?
I suppose I could. Then there'd be two of me, but I'll do that as a last resort.
Why not just log in on the Macintosh altogether?
I guess I could. It's kind of hard to work on it at the same time.
Oh,
But yeah,
that's right. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I see what you're doing.
That's a fine. That's the first reason I've ever heard for not using a Mac. So there you go, because you're actually working on it. So I might as well start off then. Andrew, you can hear us while you're doing this, right?
yeah, absolutely.
So today we have a touch of an agenda. I don't know who will be here because there's been a lot of holidays starting. Fabian said he would try pending family commitments today. But we've all agreed that we're going to try to make Mondays more like the Mondays they used to be and not so very, very much Sloan. However, there's a few things today we should probably go through regarding tomorrow presentation and getting ready for Wednesday. And in terms of Mondays being Mondays, we talked about having a bit of a theme for different Mondays. So I think we should talk about that in a bit. Come up with ideas, put them in the calendar, and then we can share the calendar with the wider community. So, we will have invited speakers, but also themed discussions. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe it won't fall by the wayside like the book club.
No, but I think it could easily be combined with book club because now that we're at the stage where, and this is, Michael, I'm glad you're here. You're getting the recap for the last 6 months. Now that we're basically done with the thinking and designing, now it's implementation based on what Andrew has already done for the next few months. Today and Wednesday will be very much, as you said, Deanie, nailing down to figure out who does what. So that means it'll be a lot easier to relax our brains in this sense and strain them in a different sense and do the book club. I think it's a very, very good idea that if we have a themed meeting, it shouldn't just be, views or whatever. It should be views. By the way, read this article.
Mhm.
Yeah, I absolutely think we should do that. So thank you for reminding me of that. As a little bit of an update, my brother, who was a theater director, actor, and all of that kind of person. Hi, Andrew, can see you now. He is doing a project unrelated to us, but anyway, we did some filming. He spent some time in the Vision Pro today. It was all very nice. And at the end of it, he mentioned the idea of looking at knowledge all around. Said, okay, fine. So he went into our work without any guidance whatsoever, and he was really, really excited. He's not an academic, but the way he could see, the way he could interact, the way he could point to his hand to see things, it was such brothers are not necessarily the most glowing of reviewers, but he was really, really impressed. So that was lovely. Just thought I'd mention that.
That's good news. I always like to hear when someone can get in the headset and test the project without instruction and have it make sense. Because
Yeah,
I know we've put effort into that, quite a few redesigns.
it really was. It really was that. So, to the benefit of Michael and to us, why don't we go through what we think we have decided for the headset development? I have a few slides. So I'll show and tell with expected huge amounts of interruptions. How's that? Oh, I'm glad you all agree. I hope. So, uh,
Has it changed from the last time we talked?
no, it has not. These are just putting them together. This view, by the way, is meant to represent what we already have that Andrew's already built. I just don't have a nice screenshot. So don't literally read too much into it. The only thing that I've requested from Andrew is a lowering of the text. I find it a bit too high now, so we all find a good starting position. Tweaks like that. This is not meant to change the design. This is about functionality and layout. So what we will need is these things on the side in the space to do something. And we have to decide in a specific implementation discussion to have a few of these up that we think are really representative of what can be done. maybe we'll have one or two with author names, but we'll also do the topics and all of that. We'll experiment. But Andrew, it's on your agenda to make select. Oh yeah, Michael. By the way, Michael, is it Michelle or Michael? I'm so sorry. It's been a while. I don't want to be rude by calling you in the wrong way.
Michael is absolutely fine. In German, you would say Michael. I'm very used in international context to react to Michael.
Okay, Michael, it is good. So, do you have accessible a VR headset today?
Nope. Since I left uni, I don't even have access to any VR headset any longer. Although I had the chance to test the Vision Pro for the first time, I was absolutely wowed. It's a long time that I've been wowed from testing new headset. It was really spectacular.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. And I'm going to explain what you see here because this is a bad representation of the brilliant work that Andrew's done. But I just wanted to mention two things, particular to you, Dini. What you said really is something that rings in my head. After doing the basics in Vision Pro and testing this, you don't really use it. A lot of people have that, you've said. I agree with you. But two things from today worth mentioning. One was there is a globe application that I've downloaded that does classic globe. So you can have it in front of you, spin it around. It's okay. But there is a view in it where you can choose to be inside the globe. Have you tried that one by any chance?
Mm-mm.
It's absolutely amazing because it's tack sharp. And the way they reverse so you can read and you're looking from inside the globe, it doesn't feel like a weird warping of the earth. It just really validates your decision that what we're designing for is a swivel chair. Because you can't really walk around in this view. You would immediately go outside the globe. But it's an amazing view experience. So that's worth it.
I'll try that one. What is it called exactly?
I can't remember. When I'm not doing the speaky bit, I will put on the headset and just write down the name. I mean, tell
Okay,
you.
then great, thanks. I am looking for apps to explore. There's not a lot.
Yeah, no, exactly. There isn't that much. And the other thing, and Andrew, don't freak out. This is a little bit about multiplayer. So my brother today, as I said, he's a theater guy. He's going to be doing immersive theater related stuff. And one thing I'm thinking about in this amazing space we have now. Okay, let me just step back a little bit. When you are in the environment, have any of you seen the Alicia Keys concert?
No.
Highly recommended because you're in a relatively small room. It all feels really real in that sense. And when we can have a shared environment with what we have built here, it is a very intimate thing. I think it'll be incredibly compelling for somebody to share this view, to be in there and to look at the literature and to move it around. So because of the theater and because of these special stereo video views, I think it comes back to us in the future. Anyway, moving on. Oh yeah, Michael, so the point here is in the headset, we have a list of proceedings from a conference. The reason we're using proceedings is we are, of course, reading one document, and there's a lot of things you can do. There is also a library, which is a ton of documents, maybe a bit much. A proceedings is a good amount of documents that people may want to go through. So that's why that's one of our core units. So it's in front of you, you can point to it, you make a gun gesture and you get a pointer. You pinch because the pointer doesn't come out of your finger, it comes out of your hand. You can actually pinch without losing where you're pointing, and that's how you open. It's really, really nice. The things you see on the right-hand side here are supposed to indicate entities or elements or things. We have no name for them yet. But the notion would be if you select one of those, it'll highlight all the papers that are related to that. So the very important thing in this environment is to be able to say that you're not interested in certain papers. So annotations is key. So if you come across a paper that clearly is outside of your interest, you need to be able to immediately select it and say, hide it. So we get to the next stage of reading. So this is very much not about passive reading. It's about being able to actively read, right? So here's an indication. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that properly, but here someone selected the name Ted Nelson. and it points to two papers that aren't authored by Ted, but that he's mentioned in. So now you can choose to do a focus to bring those forth and to hide everything else. This is probably worthwhile mentioning that the interaction system we've developed is you point with your primary hand, in my case, my right hand, and on your other hand, when you look at it, it has a menu option. So each finger has a menu. One of them will be something like focus. So if you then take your other hand and point to that, you will then have these documents in focus and the rest will fade back. The rest of you, of course, if I'm saying something wrong, this is really the time to point out if you just don't agree, obviously.
One small note on, I think the reason we're having a conversation about names the other day is, of course, something like a proceedings is probably the one place where, unless I hold a workshop, people are all putting a paper in. Most authors rarely put more than one paper into a journal edition or a publishing. So the names that we're seeing here aren't the author names, I presume. It's something to bring out to people, because
no, but that's a key.
Names sort of mean different things in different contexts, and sometimes you might need to explain that to somebody, because otherwise, literally, you might think these are the names of the authors. Well, they're not actually, or no one will have more than one item.
That's a really important point that we discussed back and forth forever, and maybe, Michael, you can help us figure this out. There are two types of metadata in this environment. One is what the user brings in. The other one is in what is in the documents. So you should be able to extract the names of all the authors in these proceedings, and that should appear in a specific way so that you are not confused by what Mark is saying. Thank you for highlighting that, Mark. The names that you, the user, have put in may or may not be in the documents. These are two different things. We haven't decided how to visually and interactively display them. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? This is one of our top issues.
I'm not sure if I understand what the user puts in as search queries, or how do I put in metadata?
So these things in the space they can be a lot of things. The notion here is that in order to have active knowledge, you have to have metadata so the system knows what it is, right? And whenever you do knowledge work, it has to be in a context. One of the contexts is who you are, right? So you can have a set of, let's say, your favorite people in computer history, maybe technologies. You can have all these things that you put in there. How we enter them is probably via the hand menu, but in a sense it's secondary, because also you should be able to subscribe to these spaces. So let's say Mark has made a very specific layout for ACM hypertext. You should be able to open that using your special hand menu workspace, and there's Mark's layout, where you may then have a timeline, you may have names, you may have technologies, because each one of these things can be as simple as plain text. So if you select the word Ted Nelson, like in this example, it'll go to those papers that have that text. They may even be more than that. They could even be full LLMs. So you can have an intelligent little thing. You select it, and it will interrogate the metadata for all the documents on the view, in the view.
But everything I see on the screen at the moment is document-based metadata, right?
That's right.
Well,
That's all we've been doing. That's all we've been doing.
Well,
And mainly because, well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, Dini, sorry, please.
This was meant to be text as defined by words. At some point in the future, we will talk about images and other kinds of activities, but right now we're just focusing on text. That was the gist of the grant.
Hmm.
Yes.
Know that my definition of text is anything in the digital space, anything that's 0 and 1. So even the human body can be text. Foda and I disagree on that aspect, but that's not part of the Sloan grant.
I don't think we disagree on it as such. We just, for different implementation in different places, I absolutely would be happy to stretch to that. But so what you see here, the column in the middle, that is the metadata from the documents. It should basically just be the titles of the papers. The stuff floating about on the right is entered by the user. That's user metadata. So if you look at the word spatiality, for instance, right? That is
Okay, I just assumed the column on the right is a list of the authors extracted from the proceedings metadata.
well, this is what we need to discuss now. So I'm very glad you're coming here with your fresh perspective. If we ignore that for a second and just look at the words spatiality, human history, teaching, and so on, those are words that the user has in this environment. So if they close down this set of proceedings and open up another, or a document, or a library, or whatever it might be, they will stay there. And you can select them and they will show you which documents correspond to those things. Similarly, while you have this proceedings open, you can choose to open a different workspace that have different things floating about. So you should be able to instantly have different elements surrounding the work.
So depending on what part I'm working on, I can use my XR context, and then tomorrow when I open the same proceedings, let's say it's a very widespread interdisciplinary conference proceeding, then I use my conversational user interface focus context, whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
So you've essentially got almost three. You've got the main column is in a sense of the papers, the items, the things you're looking at, and you're right that there is information explicitly provided by the user in the way they created the document, which is what we sort of talk about as document metadata. But we also know that, for instance, keywords are often not actually that useful to the reader and are not normally expressive of the content. Potentially going forward. But it's early days. You may have some form of machine learning AI type process providing other tags. So they're there to help you in your exploration of the medium. It's sort of it becomes a grey boundary whether they got put there for you or you chose to put them there. Because obviously the more you use the medium, the richer your information will be. Just like if you're using a lot,
that can escalate quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So what Freud's foreshadowing there is that as you have that richer picture, you will have the ability to lay it back across. But as that's individual, it's kind of hard to show because it's so personal that the set of metadata that might make sense to you instantly will be the set really well. So that's kind of hard to demo. But that's why there's just like apparent blurring.
So what you're seeing here is an actual screenshot of an early version of what we have. So it's a column of text that is just the titles. You point to one, and on the right, you get the abstract with the title again and the author's names. So that is exactly what it is. It's just taking screenshots on the headset is far from optimal. Right, so the thing is, we still need to decide on how we deal with the question of getting. So I know that authors is not exactly useful a lot of the time, absolutely, but it's a clear included set of metadata, so that's why I'm using it as an example. So let's say that this proceeding ships with clearly specified author names. What is the mechanism, do you guys think, we should be able to put those out in a column to interact with it, as opposed to our own names, which can be any?
I thought we decided that before. I thought we had that discussion before and decided that we were going to be able to highlight them and move them over. Wasn't that what we decided last week?
Hi, Peter. What do you mean highlight and move over, Dini?
Andrew, we talked about this last week. Do you remember how we decided to do it?
Well, I thought it was just like we would be able to just move them around, leave it to the user so they can slide things wherever they want. Unless we're talking about something else, because we're still going to have the snapping as well, like the auto alignment.
We're talking about something else. At least I think we're talking about something else. What I mean is, if you're in a workspace where you have entered the name Ted Nelson, that will be there, whatever proceedings you open, right? But you can save that layout as a workspace, open up maybe a timeline view, and then later go up and say, I want the one with hypertext pioneers, and Ted Nelson comes back as an example. That's a completely different thing than the names of the people who authored these papers, because they are from the papers. So the question is, how do we take that out of the proceedings interaction-wise? What is the interface we use so that we have that available? Mark, since you're on this topic already, and then Peter.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I think slightly what's happening is we're blending two things here. When you're reading a new set of proceedings, the authors are only going to be in there once. So if you, unless you can't read the title, the stuff that's already on there, the actual authors showing stuff that's already there is less use. So what's happening here is we're sort of blending a wider information you might have, or that you're laying back over things. So, I mean, for instance, it's very well having Ted Nelson, but he hasn't published anything for 10 years and is highly unlikely to be publishing much more. So it's probably actually not that useful in here. So this is the sort of the difficulty that the use case that we've taken on board here is, for instance, you're reading through a new journal, it might be a journal issue, it might be proceedings. You've got a number of articles, and you're doing the triage reading where you're basically trying to make sense of, do I understand what it is? Is it something of interest to me? And does it go on the read now pile? Does it go on the read maybe later, or does it go in the I probably never need to look at this again? Which is useful, and it's part of, just a second, and it's a key part of obviously of trying to keep up to speed in your field, because you have to do this all the time. And you're normally doing it just by maybe scrolling through a list of papers, or even sort of reading them in preview or something. This is what this is allowing you to do. That's the key activity. The keywords off to the side, be they names, be they subject matter, be they whatever essentially tagging that you've put onto it, is a secondary element which you can overlay. It doesn't have to be there. You can have it there, and you can have it in a form of space. But I'm just saying this to clarify that there are two different things being shown here together.
That's the whole point. No, but Mark, that is the whole point. The whole point is there is user-provided metadata and there is document-provided metadata. That is exactly the whole point of those two things.
Yes, but that wasn't what that's a different point to the one I'm making. I know they're different. What I'm saying is that the extra stuff on the side is part of the environment. That's separate to the list. So the key part of this view is that list you see in the center.
Sure.
All the stuff up to the side. Well, then exactly. So that it's confusing to have it there at the start, because essentially it's trying to help explain to Michael that as to what's going on here. So the stuff at the edge is something that will repay the user over time, just as if you have a reference manager that you've heavily annotated or keyworded or whatever you store your articles in. And that can be shown in the environment because it's constructed. We can have it where we like, and as pointed out, you can put those things where you wish them to be, but they are not part of the in a sense the central presentation in this view, which is to show you a list of papers.
Okay, I have to, sorry, Peter, I have to address that. What is central to the view or not is one discussion. A really important thing here is that if we have our way and things are being developed well within ACM and other academic communities, these proceedings will ship with clearly useful metadata. I'm not going to use the term author anymore because that seems to be a bit of a triggering point here. There can be other things in there, such as the locations of the authors. Maybe people really care about certain universities and not others. It can also be the data sets that are in these that can also be tagged. There can be locations of images that were taken. There can be measurements. There can be so many different things in these papers. So we need to define a way for the user to be able to easily understand that here are the keywords that I made versus I've taken this out of these proceedings and I can see them in this context. Right, so let's say, look, institution names could be one for some people, right? What could be the interface method that someone can extract that, have it on the screen, and it's clearly not what they've made, it's what's from the document. And Peter, I've paused you long enough. Please go ahead. Thank you for your patience.
Okay. Interface wise, sometimes it'd be faster for me to access an author going in by his first name or her first name, other times last name. So it strikes me that maybe we could divide the names into two columns, first names and last names. And when you select a name in one of the columns, everything that doesn't correspond to that would immediately get filtered out. So if there are 5 Smiths and I click Smith at the last name, everything except the first names that belong to someone with the last name Smith would drop out. If it was faster for me to just click and spot Ted, I'd click Ted, then you get Ted Nelson and maybe a Ted Green and a Ted Jones, and everything that didn't correspond to that would drop out. Also, I'd like to see maybe a little set of numbers right after a name. And the first number could be how many papers or things that the person authored. The second number could be how many times that person was cited. Before I do anything else, just glancing at right away. The third number could be how many times that person was indexed. And the fourth number would be how many times it was actually discussed. For instance, I was just finishing the book Metropolis, which is about the history of cities. And I've been searching everything for references to World's Fairs for my work with ICEE. And sure enough, there's a World's Fair reference in the book, but it's not an indexed reference. So there's one reference to the New York World's Fair talking about a movie.
Peter. Let's not.
Anyhow, just the numbers would give me a perspective of how that name is represented within the collection. Also, looking at papers, I'd like to just have a count of how many quotations there are in the paper, how many images there are in the paper, how many other papers are cited in the paper, how many people. But you get the idea. Just that kind of metadata, just as a set of numbers that we'd know 3 or 4 most important pieces of metadata as numbers after the items in the sidebar would help me decide what I want to even bother clicking on, and would be a tremendous information triage thing. Probably not for this iteration, but maybe for 1 or 2 down the road. But I just wanted to put it on the record now before I forgot about it with all the other torrent of things that go crossing my mind and not having it be documented.
Thank you.
So I'll turn the mic back over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Dini, please.
But I have a question. So what we're trying to get done, you have a demo tomorrow. What time is your demo in Southampton?
The demo, I don't know how much of a demo it'll be, but it's at 1 o'clock my time. And what it is all the staff at the university has been invited, and it's about XR in general. So there will be different headsets. I'm not the only one presenting, just to make that clear. And I will be talking about some of our trials and tribulations and our experience, Q&A, that kind of stuff. And some people will be able to try our experience in the headsets. So when they do that, I think I'll do what I did with my brother today. Basically let them point about, click, and see the left hand. Something that's
Let me ask a further question. I'm kind of leading to something, so
Yeah,
that's
no.
good to know. So thanks for sharing that. And so you will get you'll be able to get some feedback like you did this morning from your brother.
Yeah, I expect so. And you know, what Mark was just talking about with the primary use of this is something that I'm glad that we have established in our community. I don't know how much we're going to get into that tomorrow. I'll just suck it and see. But this particular, anyway, yes, go on.
Okay. So my next comment, I'm leading to this thing that I've been posting about to you in Slack. On Wednesday, what I need to do is 2 MOUs, one for Adam and one for Fabienne. And what they're being paid to do is the VR programming, right? So what we have to determine now that we have a plan, this was the plan you said you presented to us last week. We're going to look at it again today. We have to set up some sort of, Andrew and I have to set up a demo anyway for the ELO conference next week. But at the baseline, by Wednesday, Andrew and I can sit down and say, here's the plan as we move forward. Now, what can Andrew do to finish his part, and what can Fabienne and Adam contribute? And then that goes into their MOUs. So today, what I'd like to make sure we walk away with is an understanding of what the final plan's going to look, what a plan is going to look like, so that I can work out the MOUs and know how we're moving forward, so we can set timelines and deadlines.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's how I
So
see it.
I guess so now we're looking at this plan, which you suggested last week, and we're fine tuning it today. Is that what
Yes.
we're doing? Okay. Thanks.
That's exactly how I see it. Thank you for bringing that up. There are a few sticking points. We're now at one of them, and it's absolutely wonderful to be able to go through it with, we've got to make this thing in mind, because this has been too philosophical for too long. So one thing I'm wondering about here, and I'm primarily looking at you, Andrew, I'm wondering with our experimentation of the hand, and by the way, Michael, when you have a chance to look at this, the hand menu is insane. If you look at your hand facing you, there is a title on each finger saying what menu item it is. So you can then just snap on that and it happens. It's wonderful. Maybe we do something as simple as separate the management of document metadata finger-wise from workspace metadata. So quite literally, you point to a finger and it says document metadata or view document metadata, something like that. And then you get a submenu of the kind of metadata we have, such as author names. And it appears, and it's just quite simply visually different. And maybe, as we talked about, maybe it is in a column. I'm not saying we should follow this explicit design, but then we have the opportunity of what Peter said. This can be just a name of authors, or each individual person can show more information that is relevant for the reader. What do we feel about that? The way to get a visibly different block of metadata spawned from your hand that is from the paper, not from your room.
Andrew's got his hand up.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi. So this is like half answering the question because I realize I'm not encompassing everything you just asked. But I just realized something while you were talking there, and I wanted to share the idea. What if, like, of course, we're going to still need a default presentation to be set up for the user. But what if we worry less about specifically where things are laid out in the workspace and more of giving the user tools to lay out the stuff the way they want? For example, over on the left, you have paper authors and you've got that box around it, right? And it's a nice little setup, but maybe someone doesn't care about the authors. Or I think Deanie said she doesn't care about the authors when she first looks at proceedings. Or maybe someone really cares about the authors but doesn't like it on the left. What if instead of having by default, say the authors show up in a box, we give the user an option that says like categorize or something or group, and everything you have selected gets a box around it with some title. If you keep that sort of idea, then suddenly the user can manage their own layout a lot better.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's what we do in author, right? So you select by category, and then, sorry, I got to move you guys. And then you have this layout option here, so you can align left. Boom. So yeah, absolutely, crucially important. And we have the last one here, does that. Yeah, no question.
Right. I'm saying it, instead of having preset categories, but we can still keep the three that we have. But we could let the user have like custom categories where they can just make groups of anything that they want. Might be nice to have.
I'm not sure. Wouldn't that be a workspace? A saved workspace?
A workspace, well, that would be yes, but also I feel like when you save the workspace, that would be kind of like putting it down to come back to later. If you say like these documents are all the same topic and these authors wrote them or these names show up a bunch, group that. That now has a nice box around it and put that over there. I'm done thinking about it for now, but I want to reference it. And then you can work on some other stuff. But I just thrown out there as like a mechanic that might connect nicely with this.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely useful. Thank you. Michael.
I wondered how I would approach a new set of documents and what the order would be. Because usually if I open something new and I want to get an overview, I will first only look into the metadata that is integrated and then make up my mind what lens I want to look at it through. So for example, then say, okay, now I want to apply this context of this part of my work. And metaphorically, I could, get it out of my backpack and apply it here. So that by default, I can only see metadata that's already there. And now maybe it's rather a belt. Maybe I look down and I have all my different fields of context bundles, keyword bundles, whatever. I have it there and I take it and apply it. And it should look somewhat similar. So when you first showed it to me, I was very confused what's already been there and what's mine or what's, I don't know, personalized. So while applying it, I think it should already visually be grouped in a box, colored, whatever you decide for.
It is different currently. I'm going to see if I find a current screenshot, unless you have one, Andrew, that you want to show. But right here, this is sketching. There are hundreds of sketches. But in the implementation now, this kind of stuff, the stuff in the space is actually black. And it is on a different plane. So it is actually quite easy to tell apart. That's for sure. Yeah, Mark?
Yeah, I'm just picking up on I put a note in the sidebar about location. I mean, the one consistent thing over about 30 years of doing metadata is everybody asks for it, then looks at it when you spent tons of time making, said that wasn't very useful. Because especially in academia, people move around a lot. I mean, it's interesting for digital humanities stuff, and if you
Mark,
like location stuff, I'd sort of recommend this. But I think Andrew encapsulated it very neatly, because what he was describing was the emergent structure you're looking for. So the issue is, rather than trying to work backwards from a design of what we think we might need, is to just think, actually, what am I doing in this space? And I think this was echoed by Michael's comment. Okay, so what am I trying to do here in this thing? So again, say between two different sets of journals or conferences, it might be one way you're very familiar. You might want to actually start putting a quite heavy lens on the things you know that you expect to see in there that you really want to pull out. If it's more tangential, you might really know, it's like a mixed box of chocolates. You don't know what's in there at all. And to a certain extent, you've got to flick through. So you don't actually, the reality is you don't know. You just don't know that it's going to be one of two or three categories.
Okay,
what you actually have to do it properly in Explore is you have to take the things that you realize are relevant to the exploration you're doing at time and surface those. So I think that's a much more useful way to think about the construct of this, because otherwise we're sort of trying to work backwards from an imagined design that's sort of one size fits all and never quite fits anyone.
Right. Okay. There are different things here. There will be metadata in the documents. We may very well choose not to give the user direct access to that. It may be that that isn't useful. And when you talk about institutions and things, I am fully aware that people move around. But when you go to a conference and you get the proceedings, you may want to just see people from your own university first, for example. The point is that a document, ideally, if we get our way, will have tons of metadata inside it, which may or may not connect to the metadata that you have in your workspace. So my question really is, should the user even be allowed to view that metadata in something like columns? Whatever that category is, because visually it is a different thing. And like Peter said, when he goes into a new environment where he doesn't know, one of the things that he finds useful is the reputation of the people, which is different from Dini. Different field, different cases. Of course, we're focused on ACM hypertext, but as an idea, all of these papers basically are written by people, so it is one of the aspects. But it may very well be that we shouldn't even let them have access to that. Mark.
The thing actually I put my hand up to comment on really was that there's a possibility we're confusing two things here. 30 plus years of dealing with people's metadata has confirmed one thing to me, that it's easy to conflate the notion of there being perfect hypertext in terms of, metadata in terms of a system being able to know what it is and capture it. Getting people to actually put the metadata in is consistently proven to be nigh on impossible. So
Mark, that is our entire
let me finish. So we need to be very careful in making too much planning on something that we just know from history does not exist, because the fallibility is the human aspect. So a clever machine is not going to find the stuff that we're missing. It takes time to create. So that's why I think I like the suggestion of an emergent thing where you put forward the things that you think should be there, because you imagine them, rather than actually taking what the computer just spurns out. Because
hang on, Mark.
I just would say from lots of experience, it's normally not helpful, and what you actually get is you get noise, you get confusion, you don't get the clarity when you're trying to read.
Okay, this is really frustrating because now we're going into wider issues that I hope we do today. Today is about polishing what we're going to build, and papers do know who their authors are. Right? It is a piece of metadata that is generally acknowledging to be available.
Yeah, but it's already on screen in the middle. So actually you're now stating it twice. That's what I'm confused with.
Okay. Mark, as I said to Michael, what is on the screen in the middle? Okay. Okay, if you are that literal, it's going to be very difficult. You know very well that in what Andrew, Randall, in what Andrew has built, there is just a list of titles, right? It's just the names. When you point to them, you get the abstract and you get the author name. All I'm saying is that in addition to having your own keywords around, should we allow the user to take metadata that is in this proceedings and view them, see how they relate? One of the use cases is that you see a name you recognize in this thing on the side, click on it, and it shows you what paper they wrote. And if Peter gets his way, it may show you more information about that person. That is a true piece of metadata. It is there, it's stable, it's reliable. I'm not worried about the other kind of added things that may or may not be correct. What we're building here is a proof of concept that if basic metadata is clear, we can make useful interactions. So the whole discussions of metadata and references are messy. We know that. Yeah, Peter.
No, it's not messy, incomplete. A very important difference. Peter, sorry.
Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute when the phone was ringing in the other room. We might also want to have a notion of local metadata versus global metadata that's seen by everyone. Because I might want to add an annotation that's only meaningful to me and be able to have that merged in with what's coming in from external sources. I'm sort of imagining that different users would have metadata streams coming off of them. I might subscribe to Brendel's metadata stream and to Mark's. Andrew might be interested in Dini's metadata stream. And we could have that sort of a facility. Metadata is somewhat subjective. I might feel that something's strongly about a topic that I care about. Also, there's a notion that a paper could be alluding to another paper without explicitly citing it, and it'd be really nice if there'd be some way of augmenting that. You can sometimes tell just from the name of the paper that it's alluding to some other paper because of the naming pattern, and anyone in the field would recognize that naming pattern immediately. Okay. 7 issues, blah.
Okay. Let's stay within the bounds of what we're talking about here. What we're talking about are two very simple things. One is we present good metadata for the proceedings, us as a community editing, making sure it's there, proof of concept. We have the names, institutions, a few other things. It's there. And then the end user can have their things floating around the screen there. So my question is simply to you guys, should we let the user, take the metadata that's in the proceedings and view them separately on the screen to interrogate the documents? Or is that maybe not even useful? And if we do that, how should that be done and how should it appear? Yeah, Dini.
To answer the first question, there's a lot of metadata, right? So I think we should determine how much metadata would be accessible. So rather than all the metadata, which for me is a lot, right? The way we do it in our lab, what are the 3 or 5 things that we consider important aspects for metadata, right? So number 1. Number 2, yes, of course, they should be able to access that metadata. And there should be a way to do this. I think Andrew's already mapped out the hands and the structure. And we could have the hands be used to access the menus that we have already kind of laid out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But the question is, I mean, we need to design the hand. We've only barely started going through our thing here, but we need to decide as a group what the buttons on the fingers should be.
Okay.
So
But first, we need to decide what we're going to, if we're going to have metadata accessible, that's the first step. Like, how much stuff do we have to make accessible? That will then tell us what we have to do with the hands. So step 1, what are we trying to do? Step 2, how do we do it, right? So the metadata would be title, abstract, author, maybe date, 3 to 5 things, right? So lay those out. Then we'd lay out the hand movement, the hand functionality, so that we can get to the submenus.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Brandel.
Okay.
When I try to think back to the highest level purpose of what this project is for, as I understand it, it's to be able to support reading in an immersive environment, reading of papers. And the closest analog that I have is that I think I read I read some of it on Kindle, but I read much of Understanding Media and Gutenberg Galaxy in virtual reality for the purposes of trying to feel it, feel what I wanted to do with it. And one of the things I was struck by was the fact that it's a book. It's a couple of pretty big books rather than a bunch of papers. But one of the things that I was really felt like I was scrabbling for was that I would have loved to know where I was and how much was there, and maybe a little bit of what is related to the upcoming sections and things like that. So having the ability to make epistemic arrangements of the material.
That's the second half of our discussion today. We are looking first at the proceedings list, and then we have a mechanism to view the documents, and then we'll discuss how the document should be interacted with. So yeah, that is very, very important.
So what I'm saying is that I wanted, what I would like to do is have enough information available to me to be able to undertake epistemic actions that can separate the activity that I want to have into separable, meaningful chunks that aren't going to overload me, aren't going to make me overtired, and are going to sort of fit together conceptually as I did this here, and allow me to sort of make those plans. So in terms of the metadata that would be necessary to support that, I feel like I would, there could be some terrible presentation of metadata, but I don't know that that calculus of what I was sort of presenting presents an upper limit on what that metadata should be, but more that the metadata should be present in such a way as to be discursively interrogated. Not that it's displayed per se, but that it can be part of an ongoing refinement and examination of what are the germane features that I want to be able, and I'm not presupposing anything about the specific interactions per se, but I'm talking about my high level intent is that I want to plan and I want to separate and I want to have confidence in the thing that I'm going to do being like not regrettable. There were a number of chapters of Understanding Media that were way longer than the other ones, and
Yeah.
I was really cross with McLuhan for that and other reasons. But like, so so what I want to do in an environment like this is to be able to kind of put this structure, not necessarily a canonical structure, but a structure that's relevant for me with regard to what I want to do and how I want to understand stuff. Like, and if McLuhan starts peppering references to, I don't know, Tacitus or something, then going like, is it worth my time to go in and actually jump into Tacitus in order to get what the hell he's talking about? So, it's a so Dina knows what I'm talking about.
I don't think so.
I actually don't know if he talks about Tacitus, but
He was
like
name
Aurelius.
dropping. Brando, he was name dropping.
Yes, someone that was useful. I mean, and the thing is that like when those things don't have any potency to you, then it's like, oh, what's this name drop do? And some of them bear fruit, and some of them are like, why did he do that? I'm a jerk. So yeah, I feel like in terms of like, so to back to the question further about whether to display per se that meta information. I think in general it should be displayed, but more importantly, it should be possible to compose filtering and epistemic activities, and that can be done across a continuum of automatedness. So it can be that people actually see something and put things in piles based on it, or it could be that they have the ability to construct functionally a query that does that same work. And I'm less fussed about that and more about the ability to be able to have the capacity to make those decisions and get at that information in that way.
Yeah, fair enough. And the thing is, today and Wednesday, we're finalizing the design. We will be able to do some tweaks, but we're finalizing. So we're really going through it now based on things we've discussed. And one of the principles for me is that to really use XR, you really need to use the space. So all this stuff about reading what's in front of you, it's important, but there's no reason to be in XR to do it. The key reason to be in XR, to repeat, is to use the space. That's why we have these floaty things. We don't have a name for them yet. We know that some of them might be useful. We'll have to experiment. If you have something like keywords and names of people who might be in the documents and so on, it may be great to do history this way, for instance. However, we just need, as an interaction, as a decision, to decide the stuff that is not in your space. Maybe it isn't worth having it appear, but if it is, we need to do a mechanism. What Dini said, I agree with, but we have to design it in more detail. We should probably have two different fingers, one finger for what I put in my workspace, and another one for what I want to view that is in the documents, to make it really quick. Maybe these two. Click on this, and then I can manage my workspaces. Click on this one, and then what to see. So I saw Dini nod. I take that as the boss. In this case, saying, because I agree with you, Dini, that's why you're the boss. When I don't agree
Not the
with
boss.
you, I call you.
Not the boss.
When I don't agree with you, I call you.
Has anybody ever played Kingdom of Loathing? Randall, have you played it? Kingdom of Loathing. One of the best online games ever. And there is a whole segment of the game. There's like 25 levels. It's crazy. And then after you beat the levels, they have ascensions. You can ascend. Anyway, I've played it to the very end numerous times, but there's a character called the Boss Bat. And it's a mafia boss bat. It's a bat that looks like the mafia. So John and I laugh about the Boss Bat. You got to play it.
I'm never going to call you a boss bat, but right. So the
That's awesome.
question. Okay,
I
so
don't mind. Actually, the Boss Bat's kind of cool.
yes. So here's the thing. When I showed this to my brother today, Randall, you weren't here in the beginning when I mentioned it. He went through lots of vision things. He's learning for his own stuff. And then he went into this environment and he said, wow, quite loudly, right? Because I think Dini has made some terrifically important choices. And now that I've done the Alicia Keys experience and a lot of these experiences myself, sitting in a swivel chair in a gray room is absolutely fantastic, right? So that is our keystone. That is our experience. We're not a walk-through VR. We're not a forward-facing VR. So that means using the space. So the only question we need to answer right now, before we get to the second half, because we're on the hour, is if the user is allowed to view metadata from the documents. We've already now decided it's going to be on the hand. Andrew, I hope you're happy with that. How is it going to appear? Are we just going to task Andrew with just trying different things because he can iterate just maybe we start with a frame around it? Because the ability to select one, just as an example, one author's name to see what the paper they've written is quite cool. And the whole thing about institution, I agree with Mark. People leave and all of these things, but let's say I'm going into a new science that I don't know about. I want to know what papers were written in China versus Europe, for instance. That is useful knowledge as a initial point for me. Blah, blah, blah. So we agree that we should allow it to be seen by choosing a finger. We agree that it should look different, maybe in column format to begin with. And Andrew is going to design what might look right. Are we all happy with that for this stage? Because these things are going to iterate with the big things we have to nail down today. Peter, you have your hand up, so you get to first say whether you agree with me or whether you completely agree with me.
Mostly agree with you. I'd like to mention how Tinderbox handles the problem and how I've sort of leveraged Tinderbox's internal affordances to address dealing with it. In Tinderbox, you have a large number of attributes, and all objects are considered to have all of the attributes available on them. So you might have 1,000 attributes out there, and you don't care about all of them. So what Mark Bernstein did was he set up the notion of displayed attributes, which was a magical attribute that is a list of which attributes are going to be displayed in the detail view of a selected note. Leveraging that, the other feature that Tinderbox has is that if a note has values for items within the database, they're available automatically on a drop-down menu. So if you have an attribute and there are 5 known values for the attribute, you automatically get a drop-down menu of those 5 attributes if you want to select them. The other feature Tinderbox has that plays into this is its prototype-based inheritance. So each node has a prototype, and one of the things that you can inherit from the prototype is the displayed attribute list. So what I came up with was a way of introducing views. So if I want to have different views on the metadata available for an item, I'll create the core prototype for that class of item, book, person, whatever we want. Then I'll have different views that are inheriting from that prototype. And in each one of those views, I customize what the displayed attribute list is. And then I have another user level attribute that is the view. So that view will get the names of the alternate prototypes, and I select that, and instantaneously what I'm looking at is able to shift so that I can have different perspectives available to me. And I just go in and I select a different view from the drop-down menu. And then I have a background agent that spots that change of what the view value is. And then it goes and changes the current prototype of the note based upon that, which causes the displayed attributes to morph to match that view. So basically the idea is having alternate views and using a prototype mechanism to be able to inherit them. Then we could map the prototypes to fingers or finger segments on the hand, and it would be contextually dependent. Because if I'm looking at YouTube videos versus conference papers versus web pages, the metadata that matters for each of these is going to be somewhat different. For web pages, I care about what the top level site is that the thing was spun off of. For YouTube videos, I'm interested in who produced the thing, what time period it came from, maybe how many minutes long it is, that kind of metadata. So the short video clip, is it going to be a 2-hour video?
Okay, that's going in a lot of detail, Peter. Peter, that's a lot of detail.
So basically, okay, to bring it back to our thing, we could have a notion of an external context, an internal context, and those could be a couple of views, and we could assign them for different classes of objects, And what you'd be selecting from your hand would be which one of those classes of metadata sets you're interested in. And the metadata set that's actually displayed could be dependent upon what kind of an object it is that's selected. So it keeps the number of selections down to a reasonable number, and it's context sensitive in that the class of the selected item is going to determine what the mapping of metadata attributes are to those broad notions of, its overall context, greater context. Yeah.
I'm glad we have it recorded, but it's a bit advanced for now. I'm going to show something and see what you think. This is very simple. So we have a column of stuff. In reality, what we have now is this middle thing, right? We have the papers, we have a line, and we have the abstract, which is great. How about we do something as simple as this? First of all, we draw a line, a line box around the proceedings. So they're no longer just this, they have a box all around it, okay? So we know that that is a bounded object. Then what we do is that anytime we draw forth metadata from the proceedings, they appear framed on the side in columns, good old-fashioned columns, right? So that when you move the whole proceedings, they follow. So if I now select Caitlin Fisher in here, it will highlight whatever she wrote. If I choose Vancouver, it will highlight Dini. So we will have a mechanism on each one of these columns to turn them on or off. We don't need to have any that you don't want. But the point is that if you want to have metadata from the document, it's stuck to the document. Metadata that is yours is free floating.
I like that a lot. That resolves the concern I had earlier. It makes it transparent what kind of metadata comes from.
Thank you. Sometimes going back to more traditional solutions, boxes may be appropriate. So also, I can't see Andrew's face in there. We have too few of you shown, but so also on the right here, where it happens to be text, this would potentially be the box where we show the abstract and stuff, right? So it'll still be exactly the same layout. The only thing Andrew will have to do for this is first of all draw a boundary box around the proceedings. And if we start messing about with the internal stuff, doing boxes on the side with a way to close them. Any comments on that before we hand over to Mark? Andrew, do you have?
Mark made a good comment in the chat. Can't we do this already in 2D space? So I guess this begs the question, what is 3D about this? And if it's not, what can we do to maintain this kind of structure, but make it more virtual, more 3D experience?
Right. So my comment on that is simple. Absolutely agree. This stuff here in the boxes could be in any medium. The 3D are two things. One, it's your own keywords or whatever they are floating about, which can use the entire space. And also, if the proceedings is in this kind of boxiness, which is the same as it is now, it's just not, it doesn't literally have the box, that's all. It's still a column. We can have several of them open, and we can see what metadata contain or is constrained to them. But the key is that we maintain the elements in the space that can be anywhere you want. You can have a cluster of names somewhere, a cluster of topics somewhere. You can really use the 3D space with that.
I'm still not seeing why I need a headset for this. I guess that's the thing. I mean, why would I want to don a headset for this? This looks great. I love the design. It makes sense. But I can do this on my beautiful, giant Apple over here, right? My Macintosh right here. And so why would I want to put a headset on for this?
Okay. Text.
I mean, I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm
trying to answer both you and Mark. Text inherently is 2D to begin with. We are trying, of course, all of us, to exploit the dimensions afforded to us by the headset. Some of it will remain flat to be useful. There's no question about that. So yes, we're trying to figure out how to stretch it out. My proposal with this is almost exactly what we had an hour ago and a year and weeks ago, which is The main proceedings, it's going to be in a column. The only thing that will also be in the column now is any inherent metadata from that, such as authors, etc. So it doesn't really change anything from what we've had before. That's the first point. But also, with this model, we can have several proceedings in the space using our 360 swivel chair. And really, really key, the elements, the keywords, the other names, we can put them anywhere we want. So I can imagine a room where over in the corner here, I have the names of you guys. You're my team. If I select that, then whatever proceedings I have, I can see which articles you have written. That's useful.
I have an answer though. I mean, I think I have a response to my question. The whole point of 3D is depth.
I don't
So
think so, but okay.
it is. There's 3D is depth, right? And in volume, right? So how we can do that is not make it columns flat, but have the columns in some sort of depth where we can move them back and forth. They are independent of each other in the sense that they can be brought forward and brought back so that we have control over them. We can also slide them behind. So back to the plates. Remember we talked about the notion of parallax design and plates moving across each other last week. Can we go back to that idea so they can be in columns, but the columns can be moved about in back and forth and side to side?
What would be the benefit of that?
Well, first I can hide things. I don't have to have them sitting out there all the time. Secondly, I can have them at my beck and call when I do want them. Thirdly, it would give us some sense of being in a 3D space.
I'm not
It makes
sure.
it more real.
Do you mean that the columns are behind, or you mean that they are offset?
When they're offset, they can be pulled forward and back, right? They can be highlighted, dimmed. So I like the structure. I mean, I like your idea. So good. Now let's put a little bit of a twist to it. Let's make it three-dimensional. I see Brando kind of shaking his head. Is that yes or no? You're thinking?
I am thinking. I was trying to make an assessment of the angular range of the monitor that I have right in front of me.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, what I was actually going to say is, I mean, the one thing that seems to be missing in this is that we're not talking about trying to read and assess papers. We've gone down a rabbit hole about what good metadata looks like, and we know that good metadata is actually rather hard to find. What we do have in front of us is a list of papers, and and the question is, and if you're doing the job diligently, you've got to give everything a fair shout. So just picking all the favorite candies off the top is not necessarily good. So because what my thought was, the use case was really, this is a number of works being presented to you that aren't familiar with you. Whether you know some of the authors or not is by the by, whether they're your collaborators is by the by. But you've got this, something that's part of your academic practice or your commercial practice. You need to understand the stuff. You need to triage through it. So whether I know them, like them, or stuff is all fine and dandy later in the piece. But at this point, I've got to go through 20, 40 objects, try and get an understanding about whether they are relevant. So where they were written or who wrote them actually isn't so relevant, really. I need to come to a mature understanding of what it is, so I can make an assessment as to whether I actually have to engage with it.
But that's from your perspective. That does not hold universally, Mark. If you're reading philosophy, the author's name is very, very important. Please don't just dismiss it as being nothing. Just for you.
No, but it's getting overly stressed, and it's taking us away from the core use case. Because the one thing we're not talking about in all of this is actually how we're sort of decide how we're indicating to ourselves which are pertinent. We haven't talked about, for instance, that one of the key things you might want to do is if you do have things like running sessions or running topics, whether those are mapped, you might want to disambiguate the short papers from the long papers, because it's probably the longer.
Mark, we are talking about that. That is an example.
Well, no, we haven't really discussed that.
No,
so
no,
that's what I would
Mark, we haven't
try
gone
to
through every type of metadata. We haven't. No, absolutely not. Sorry for interrupting you. But the notion here is when there is metadata in the proceedings, how should it be accessed and viewed? That's what we're talking about. There's myriads of types. Of course there is.
Yes, and this is what's got us off into doing all this the sort of design stuff that's getting ahead of what we're trying to do. What I haven't heard articulated at the moment is basically deciding almost at first level triage. So what are you going? How do you know the ones? I mean, you can make link lines and come off.
We
have to do
Mark,
something.
sorry
Please let me finish.
again,
Please let me finish. Please let me finish. So we can do those things, and they're nice and they're interesting affordances, but we actually still have to get to finish the scenario, which is okay. So I sort of these 6 papers are now more interesting. So what am I going to do with them? How do I indicate it in the workspace that I'm actually going to do something? I leverage the point that's well made by Brandel earlier. So I want to be doing things that take me to something useful and meaningful to do. I'm not arguing against having this richness of metadata. I mean, I'm working world is all about metadata, so I'm happy having tons of it. But it can just be an overload, and it can be just a way to put off doing the work. So the key thing that I think we need to circle back towards is saying, so how do we, having displayed all this stuff, but how do we show to ourselves that this is something we wish to do more with?
Yeah, but Mark, Mark, we have discussed that at length, and we have reached conclusions for that. It's 2 things. One is the notion of focus, to decide you're going to read a specific paper. And the other one is the notion of annotations, to say either hide this, I'm not interested, or to annotate it to say, I would like to read this later. So,
I'm not sure it's annotations, because the whole thing,
one
of the things we're not using is the Excel space.
Please, Mark, we have 40 minutes left, right? We agree on this stuff.
Well, we don't, unfortunately.
Okay, but Mark, please, okay, we're going through this.
Well, I haven't heard everyone agree to it, is what I'm saying.
Please
I'll
listen.
just put that out there.
Okay, Mark, we've gone through philosophical discussions very, very much for the last 7 months, okay? We have decided over the last few weeks that we're going to have an environment where we have a list of proceedings and stuff in the room to help you decide which ones to read. That has been decided. It is nailed to the wall. The question is how, okay? And if you don't like that, please write a proposal for what you think it should be, ideally with drawings, okay? At this point, Andrew has to get to work and just throw all of this away and to talk about, what about...
It's not me throwing it away. That's a very unfair comment, I'm afraid.
No, but it's like... We had such a useful meeting last Wednesday. It was so positive. It was so building. And then, Michael comes back in here and wonder, why we're throwing our toys around.
Well, we've ended up at a 2D design again. And that's
we haven't. It hasn't even changed. It's exactly the same. And Dini brought up something very clever. How can we make it 3D? Very happy to entertain that discussion. Right, but the whole notion of being in a space where you have papers, you click on one to open it, and now you can disassemble the paper, which I hoped we would be able to talk about today. As Brandel has brought up in the beginning of our talk, as you brought up many times, to your credit, we haven't gotten to that point because for some reason we need to do battle over the way that we see the proceedings, and now it's upsetting that it's a column. It's been a column for months, right?
You missed. I feel you've missed my point, which is not about. It's fine to click on something and focus it, but that's a linear step out. What I'm talking about is looking at this group of things, and you're trying to understand, right? So these are the ones that are about, XR in medicine. These are the ones that are about, historical digital heritage or something. At that point, you're not reading any of them. What you're actually trying to do is sort them apart. So one of the things that we talked about in the past, so the joy of the XR space, is we could do that. We could sort these apart, and we seem to have moved away from that in terms of a sort of a fairly fixed linear display from which we would jump out into one thing, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not.
We haven't moved away from that, Mark. We haven't moved away from that. We haven't moved away from that. We haven't moved away from that. There's absolutely no reason you can't take a paper out of this pile select it and say lift it and move it somewhere else. It's been in so
No,
many
but how do I move these three separately, slightly from those three? And then, because what I'm actually trying to do is I'm
What you
trying to
do
sort
is you
of
lift them, right? You lift them into focus, and then you move them to the side. This has been in a direction we've talked about many, many times, okay? And that's totally, I don't mind talking about it again. I also like to revisit stuff, but it's a really little bit dispiriting to be trying to solve a small issue of how do we show inherent data, and because it's shown on the side, we get into this, isn't this just 2D? Right? There are so many other aspects to this, and we're not going to be able to get to them today. You know, how we, yeah, I
We
don't
did
know.
talk, we did talk about the parallax and the plates, right? And Andrew said he could do that. He was shaking his head, yes, that would be very easy to do. He's already doing it now. So can't we say that we like what you're presenting with
It's,
this idea that we can?
I don't think it's about what I'm presenting as such, but when we're talking about things like parallax and behind, one thing we have to decide. I think one thing you don't like, Dini, if I've understood it correct, is when we have text, you don't want to have a background on the text. It should all be transparent. But if we do an overlay, then you have a line of text, you have another line of text. Legibility, of
That's
course.
where the dimming comes in. I mean, things dim when you bring them forward. If they're all in front of me, no background. I'm not looking at a beach. I'm not looking at a piece of paper. It's all on gray background.
Okay,
But they are modular so that I can move them around back and forth. So not just side by side, but in and out. That's the third dimension, the notion of depth. That's all I'm saying. So I'm totally in agreement with you. We're not arguing against you. I'm just saying that we could talk about what we've already discussed last week, and that is providing some depth with this structure. That's all.
right, Peter.
Okay, I think we need to have the ability to define search filters and
Okay,
name
Peter.
them and have them visible in 3D space, and to be able to have named sets of search results from an instantiation of the filter.
Okay,
move
we
that
have
around.
that, Peter. That's what the elements are. That's what the elements are. This is something I've gone through a lot of times. If you have something floating in the space, that can be exactly that. It can be a criteria, not just a thing. So yes, we absolutely have that. Randall.
I wanted to ground the question of like why is this in 3D in some more pragmatic sort of characterizations of it. And one of the things is that most of the time, if you're in looking at a PDF or a website on a computer, you tend to have a pretty fixed spatial arrangement of all of the visual elements that it's made out of. And they're also necessarily limited in terms of the real estate you can devote to them. When I was looking at my computer screen, my laptop here, I don't estimate it to be any more than I think 30 degrees of horizontal field of view right now. And you know, on a Quest you get 105 degrees. On the you should probably get something like 97. And that's a lot more, but it also means that you can come up with relative spatial semantic arrangements for things that are outside of your field of view that you can kind of return to and be confident of. And so you can construct a semantic space that has the ability to stand in for encodings that you have the ability to make. I do think that it's essential for people to be able to have the capacity to make those relative spatial arrangements in order for it to have that significance. And that in that sense, it's more akin to not using a window or an application, but an entire computer or even an entire room to do this reading. If somebody has all of the proceedings printed out in a way that means that they don't care about the fate of the specific pieces of paper, that's a better analog for what people should be able to expect to do in any kind of virtual environment for this. And so, yeah, I think can't we do this in 2D already? I think most of the time when people have 2D displays for this kind of mode of working, they get cold feet with regard to how destructive I think the good reading might be able to be. and two, they tend to be a lot more parsimonious with regard to the sort of the display scale and the depth. And so I think those things together are important things to return to and make sure that we have clear paths to. I understand that you're trying to keep the issues separate, and when I was talking about the sort of the goals for myself, I think it is just challenging to keep these things separated when we need to return to the high level goal of what we're doing with these these documents and these arrangements in order to answer the question. So it is important to be able to kind of come up with what are the terms for how metadata is presented, as you're trying to get to, which I appreciate. But it's challenging while we're still in such novel territory to be able to keep those concerns as separated, because we, for better and worse, just don't have enough nailed down.
Okay, we got
Actually,
30
sorry,
minutes.
go ahead.
Good. We have 30
So-
minutes, so we have to, and I have to go at about 5 till. So can we get to some point right now, Frodo, where we can move forward? Are you feeling
I'm feeling,
attacked?
yeah, I feel it. I'm so grateful for the money and Dini and Andrew, all of you guys as well, but the fact that we can build and test. One of my friends is the editor of a serious British thing, and he says on their app, when they argue, they build and test. We can build and test. That's what we need to do. But what we need to kind of get away from for a little while is the stepping back nonsense, because stepping back is important in the beginning, not now, right? And as far as 3D space is concerned, we haven't even gotten to reading a document, which could be very, very dimensional, right? All we wanted to do now is find a way to show specific data, and we have to go down rabbit holes of metadata and stuff. We don't have the time to do that. It's really, really tough. I will move on and try to get to the next step. But we need to build now, not question. It just isn't the time. It is really tough. Right. So whatever. And then we have...
so back to that, Frodo. Just to finish that. So in answer to your question, I don't care how it's presented. What I care about is what the presentation supports. And so if you have a point of view about what a given kind of presentation supports, what you think it does, that's much more important to me.
That's what we're trying to talk about.
Great.
Yes, Peter.
Yeah, just another thought to put on the record. In thinking in terms of the swivel chair, each different wedge of arc, as you rotate the chair around, could correspond
Okay.
to a different...
No, Peter, not for
I just
now.
want to get this on the record, please, Frodo.
No,
Just let me get
write
It'll be
it down
captured.
then.
It'll be captured. Okay. Before I lose the thought, we were talking about swivel chair. I want to come back to thinking about the swivel chair for just a second. Now, what if we anchor the document to your head so that as you swivel, the document will stay in front of you relative to your head as you're swiveling. And then as you swivel around, that could take the document through different views, controlling what comes forward and what comes back. So as I swing my chair around to the left, material related to people comes forward. If I swing the chair around to the right, material related to concepts comes forward. But the document itself is tracking me as I'm swinging around, but my body movement of swinging around is controlling what material is being brought forward and being brought back. That's all I'm thinking about in terms of using swivel chair in 3D. I just wanted to get on the record. We can move on now.
Right. Those are the kinds of points we hope to be able to get back to on Mondays. And we also wanted to have some time today to talk about themes. Dini and I will try to hook up separately to think of themes and literature to support the themes. But when we're talking about design, we just kind of have to stick to that. Right. So when we're talking about what these things afford, Brandel, I completely agree with you. So the work that we've started with the hand thing, it came from Adam. Apparently Adam has seen some papers related, but I think it is taken much further here. I think Fabienne also sent some papers on American Sign Language in XR. Really fascinating things. But the fact that XR is missing interface, the fact that we can use our own hands is amazing. So what we're trying to do now, first of all, is give Andrew some marching orders for what to build as we think more about the functionalities within those views, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, when it comes to what Rob is writing and what Peter said, that is what this is, in a sense, right? The notion of the library space or the proceeding space is literally you start with a set of papers in front of you. You have around the room, you have all kinds of things. It can even be an orb representing the LLM of Brandel's brain, right? For the sake of discussion. So if you point towards that, you swivel around, point towards that, it'll give you analysis of these documents. So that is how we're using the space. As you move around, you have different aspects. You can have 20 different proceedings around the room, put in different places with different things. That is exactly what we're talking about. We're not talking about an automatic tracking. That's a little bit different. Right, so here the notion is that when in this view, to make sure we're on the same page, the point is, first of all, to get rid of papers that just aren't interesting now. There will be some. And in some fields, of course, you want to read every paper, but if you go into different kinds of science, often you simply don't have the time. So that's why the notion of what might or might not be called annotation or saying this paper is interesting or not is really, really important. We think that will be by highlighting something and doing the hand menu, which one of the items is for that kind of stuff, right? Mark, you don't look very happy with that.
No, I was going to say it cries out for a gesture. I was thinking back to
yes, but that's what the hand menu thing is.
Well, not really, no, because you're using a menu. By a gesture, I mean something
no. The whole notion of the hand menu is it becomes a gesture. The problem we had with gestures, we found out, is that they're very often false positives because we move our hands when we think and when we talk, right? So when Adam introduced the notion of when you point from one hand to the other, the false positive rate goes way through the floor because we rarely do that by mistake. Now, the current menu that Andrew has done, it goes floating into space. I would like to have as few of those as possible. We will need some, no question. It was a great addition he did. But one thing we want, for instance, to focus something, to read it, I really want it to be one finger. So literally, you just touch your little finger, for example, and those documents come forward. So that's what I mean by gesture. If we can find other gestures, we should do that. But the whole point here is that if you look at your hand, it will say, written on your pinky, focus. So a new user will just be told, look at your hand, your controls are written there. It's a context menu, right? This was not my idea, and I think is absolutely brilliant, and it can be expanded upon. So that's really important. Anyway, so now we decided to open something, we do a tap, and Randall, thank you for the suggestions you gave to Andrew last week for how a double tap kind of thing could work. If you pull it towards you, so to speak, and then we have, this is what we discussed last Wednesday. So you're presented with what looks like a PDF. It's extremely simple, very few things visually interfering because you're in reading mode. Currently, with the technology we have, selecting text is not feasible for September. But of course, in the near future, you need to be able to select text and do a lot of things to individual pieces of text. But what you have on here, the triangle in the lower right-hand corner, which will be reversed if you're left-handed, is to resize the document, what looks like a document, up and down. That's all you can do in this environment. So you can make it really small, really tall, up to you. The little paper cut, is the scroll bar. So that indicates where you are in the document. The I in the lower left-hand corner is information, and then you have three types of things as well. So yeah, this is what I just said. And we should probably have a nice gesture for scrolling, like maybe a palm thing. I don't know. Right now, I don't care because we'll need to test it. So, I'm sure Andrew has great ideas and we'll look into that. So if you touch or mouse over, so to speak, the little scroll bar, you get your table of contents / outline to the side. This should support more than just headings. What it should support, I don't know. I'm currently experimenting in Author with these things that Mark and I came up with a while ago, which are called structures. These are only visible to the author, but they are in the metadata so that if the reader wants to, they can bring them back, because then we get cool things like, hang on, you guys are blocking this. right? So let me, I can't see you guys. Okay. So back to this. That's the basic interactions we have. Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong place. What's going on? Okay. And of course, this would be reversed if someone is left-handed. Andrew, please.
Just for clarity for me here, could you verify what the difference is between the outline down at the bottom and the outline on the left? Or are they the same thing and the button just opens it as well?
They are not the same thing. Great question. But I think we just have to experiment to see what makes sense, because an outline currently in Author does a few things. Sorry, your video thing is blocking. Let me put you to the side. Come on here. Whatever. Okay. So what it does, you see these things here, view, outline, heading, structurals, and all of that. These indicate what will be shown when you're in outline mode. For instance, here it shows names, and here it shows any glossary terms, and here it shows those structural texts. So the point is that I really don't know yet. I think we need to test what kind of things should be shown in the outline, and it may be that this on the side thing is very helpful to an extent, but it's not very helpful for other things. If you do, obviously this should be on the other side then. So I don't know. You shouldn't worry about that yet. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Andrew, please.
I've got one last continuation for that since you answered the first part. That then leads into, so on the left, your current prototype looks very nice because you have the outline thing on the left matching the height of the document, but we already established the document can be resized. So what happens if the document is larger or shorter than the amount of outline? Does that get clipped? Does it just stick and sort of overlap? What happens there?
My feeling, and I would love to hear what everyone has to say on this one, it doesn't matter, it would just go on. So if this was much further down, it will be further down. I think this should be aligned centrally. So if it's only 2 items, you can see my cursor, right? They would just show here.
Okay, that's fair.
So they are, in that sense, independent. That makes sense, right? Okay. So yeah, the point is, yeah, right. So then we have 2 grab handles. So to move the document around, instead of having the hand we have on the side, inspiration taken from Vision OS, if you point to a non-active area of this bottom bar, you can move the document somewhere else. These grab handles, they're horribly designed here. I'm sure we'll think of something better. Only appear on being lasered for that thing. Make sense? And then we have the other breakthrough I feel we had last week, which is, well, hang on. Yeah, first of all, the little element things in space would also be in this view, let's not forget. So they can also be used to interrogate inside the document if you select them. But here's the thing, if you click on references, and I absolutely agree, read outline references are very 2D, very boring ways of doing it, but they're also very, very clear. So hopefully we'll get something more imaginative in the future. But the point is that the references view is completely separate from the read view. So the kind of stuff that Mark and Adam did before can be done here. It doesn't have to fit the same rectangle. It can be a timeline view going to the right. It can be, this is basically an open space to accept that when an academic looks at references, they have very different needs than when they're reading the document.
And aren't they usually in parallel, the needs?
Yeah.
So at the moment it replaces the view completely, and that already annoys the hell out of me when reading papers because it's jumping back and forth, which is really not what PDFs are made for.
Yes. Yes.
I wonder if it could be side by side and I can just open and collapse it.
We could have a function whereby you can, so to speak, option click on these things where you spawn a new window or something. However, It's also the notion of what's in focus isn't that much. And don't forget, let me just, we will hopefully be able to do something like, okay, I don't think I have it here, but Mark insisted very nicely quite a while ago in Reader that if you select a reference, you get a mouse over showing all the information. So when you're reading a document in this environment, you shouldn't have to go to references to check it. So that's really, really important. So the notion is that when you're looking at the references, you're really focusing on the references for their own sake, such as clicking on one
Okay.
to see what that cites.
Yeah, if there's that shortcut as a, I don't know, feed forward, then once I'm at the references, it's really focused references. Agreed.
Yeah, you don't have to agree on anything here, but the fact that you feel that for the moment that may be useful is good. Thank you. Mark. Oh, you're muted, which is not always a good thing.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I have people coming in and out of the house. Yes, could we just go back to the page view that you had? I'm just wondering if it would be possible. There's a sort of an element of metadata that we don't necessarily have at the moment, that basically as you're scrolling this, that the references that are pertinent to the text that is on the page, or at least, you know, in the middle section of the page, could basically just contextually be sat there to one side. So in other words, something, because we have a tooltip, it sits over the text, either often above it or below it, which means that the bit of text just close to what you're reading is obscured. Whereas if it was just off to the side, or essentially, plus the fact that if you're scrolling gently through, you're sort of skim reading through a document, you'd actually see the references roll by in the margin. The missing bit of data in that, of course, is that for the person programming this, they'd actually they would need to have that mapping of offset location within the overall text to the references. So I suspect at the moment it's a bit of work in that we don't actually have that information, but in our sort of concept of having all the information we want, I think that could be possibly an interesting way, because essentially it's just contextually putting the information there for you as you read, and if you want to interact with it more, it's already there, and otherwise you can just choose to not concentrate on it, because in a sense it's just off to the side of what you're actually looking at. I don't have a
problem with that at all as an option for when you're reading, have more. In fact, a jokey thing that I'm putting in my human paper is we should redefine XR to stand for X-ray vision. Just jokingly. So to give a more X-ray vision of this stuff, as you're suggesting, it sounds like a good idea. Brandel.
So the PDF, the specific document that you're looking at appears as the rasterized PDF view. Is that correct? So in terms of what we're seeing when we are
No. This is all based on HTML or RTF or something like that. It's just presented, at least initially, as a very familiar PDF style. It most certainly is not a PDF. That's why you can change the height of it and so on.
Okay. Oh, you're changing the height, so it's not a uniform scale. So it's not a uniform scale. You're just changing the vertical height, and so that's actually revealing more. Are you going to be able to see more or less of it?
Yes, because this is actually, believe it or not, a scrolling view. The whole thing. This just happens.
Oh, and that's going to continuous. It's going to scroll continuously rather than being paginated.
We are looking into how to deal with that. I prefer pagination, but Mark and I have discussed this at length, and I think a very good midpoint is continuous, however, really easy way to skip to the next heading. So if you do something like, let's say, tap on the heading here, it'll hoist up the next heading.
Yeah, I would really recommend pagination for the structural affordances that it confers for people to have confidence about the relative arrangement of things and to be able to have a scannable capacity for being able to look out for landmarks. But I mean, I'm not officially involved in the project. Something sort of to echo what Michael was saying was that I would really love to be able to attend to multiple facets of a document at once. And so to be able to look at multiple pages at once or to be able to pull things out and separate them would be, I think, really important. And that doesn't have to be at a paragraph level. That may be at a per page level. But I really do want to be able to attend to one set of notes. And it could be that I actually if it's easier to take functionally a screenshot where you're basically rasterizing and you're losing information, then that's one way of doing it. But I really do want to be able to look at and kind of compose a structure of analysis over a document on my own terms, and that means being able to look at two parts of it in different ways or in different places at the same time.
So
that's something like I said, I'm not particularly opinionated about the mode or mechanism, and I'm willing to make concessions about what information may be lost or losable by it, but it's something that I would consider to be pretty important. I copy paste a lot.
Yeah. So this was one of the early prime things that Dini wanted, which is great. We currently call it focus. We're not sure if we're going to use focus or lift. So as a test in Reader here, if you select text and you do that, it lifts it up into this view. It's made for a different thing, but you can see it's free floating. The Reader that I have for Vision Pro also does that. Now, this is a dumb version of it. What it needs to do in the environment we're working on is to retain where it came from and all that stuff so that you can have all these clippings or something in space. And these clippings can be entire sections or small sections. So this is where you really get to grips with what you're writing and moving it about. So yes, we all agree that's very important.
There are comments about pagination in the chat.
I'll just
Might wanna
explain.
look
I don't disagree with Brandon's point at all. I think one of the things we've just seen coming is that the world is slowly moving on. So the challenge really is we've got to put in a replacement for the pagination because it's going to go away. So if we don't start planning now, it's there. It's also probably for shorter things, being able to scroll read, certainly with a book. It's a long form text. Then again, if I'm reading a novel in Kindle, I got to the point where I'm able to turn off the page numbers and I just probably look at percentage through. But that was one really nice thing that came out of last week was the little in cut on the side to show you in whether you're scrolling or you're going by page view, it still gives you an indication as to where you are overall in the document with the height of the window, for want of a better word, being the overall document. It's quite nice because it's filling in some of what a scroll bar used to do. So it's quite subtle, but it gives you that sense of where am I. But I definitely would agree that there is a challenge in being able to have this sort of fine addressing, which is something I think we're all focused on.
Yeah, thinking back to Kindle, one of the Kindle has 3 or so modes of display. They have page numbers as they're understood. They're the actual canonical page numbers generally. And so if your zoom level is that you have 3 pages per page or 1.5 pages, then you end up with some weird situations. And then there's the fragment number or something like that. And those
Hashlock.
Number in the
It's Hashlock. It's 150 bytes, I think. I've read somewhere.
Right.
I think is the notion.
But the fragment numbers are they're for me almost always 4 digits. They could easily stretch to 5 if you're looking through a large document. And one of the things that I don't like there is that there's no structuring information in the number. Like if you were to break it into sort of separated it over a couple of different orders of magnitude, then that would make it a lot more legible as a number. Something that through the design as you presented in general today, Frode, that I would be cautious to work on is reducing the amount of information that people see at once, unless it's under their own power that they're presenting it. Yeah, like being able to see a little enough that it's meaningful is useful. Sorry, Dini, go ahead.
No, that's good. I just need to say I've got to go, but before I do, Frodo, at some point we're going to have to talk about something else at the Future Text on Mondays, so that we can get to themes and things like that. And we did not get to it at all today. So good luck on your presentation tomorrow. I look forward to hearing what people say about the project. And perhaps we can touch base at 7:30 on Wednesday morning. There's a lot of stuff I want to catch you up on. And catch everybody up on.
Yeah.
Symposium, competition, grant writing, all those things. The project reports, all of that needs to be talked about too. So,
Dini,
anyway.
I cannot do Wednesday at that time. We'll have to figure out something else. I got a meeting with somebody I just can't change.
Okay, no problem.
Okay,
I'll see you all on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Dini.
Mark, I'll talk to you about the paper later.
So
I'll jump onto the train and also get a run. But I think it was a great opportunity to join back in to get an overview of what's going on at the moment, and especially everything that has been happening since I joined last time, which is really great. So good job there. Thanks for the heads up.
to get your hands literally
See you
dirty
again soon.
again. Yeah, good to see you. Thank you.
Bye.
So, Andrew, I know you got to go in a minute. Anything quick, and then you have more time in a minute.
Yeah, that's why put my hand up here because I'll be popping out in a few minutes. But I did want to give a quick update because I told you I would on Monday. And that is I've been working end of last week on the time I had to get all of your sort of minor polish changes put in. And then today I know I can't get the document working as intended with the new design, but I think I can visually get it there. So if you're fine with it not fully functioning with the new stuff you want, I think I can get it sort of looking the way you want and then call it good from there. And then of course, after your Tuesday demo, I'll be going in and actually trying to do it properly.
That's fine. Very, very fine. The point of tomorrow and the point of a lot of these is pure theater. The reality is, of course, has to be useful, but the initial thing for something like this is just someone sits and goes, wow, look at all this. That's all for now. But before you go, to address a few of the points, we had a view where we had the pages next to each other. So I'm kind of glad that you're here, Brandel, representing the spatial perspective. We're constantly battling, I don't want to use the wrong words, but the happiness of the eye of reading a specific thing versus how do we sense a bigger structure. So I think we should stick with this layout or similar as our key core thing, but I think we should absolutely experiment with things like, can we see the other things coming out from the side, and if so, how? Because there's no question in my mind that what we're doing now is delivering the bare bones obvious thing first, and we have to do the environmental and the thing. You have been making yourself, and you have shown brilliant, spatial views in a circle and all of that stuff. Mark has really been pushing for that too. So now that we seem to have gotten more of a handle of the basics, I'm just wondering if we have anything. Yeah, you see, we don't even have anything that's spatial here yet. Look at all these things we've tried. We need to go further. Most of these tests, they're just not useful, which is fine. They're tests. So now that Andrew is building the core, we can start expanding. Because one of the things as well, I'm sure you all agree, is that when you have more space, you have bigger opportunity to make a mess. So yes, the user should be able to put a lot of stuff, but in a considered way.
Yeah, one of the things
Andrew goes? Yeah, Brandel, please. Yes.
Yeah. One of the things about a mess is that if it's creative and deliberatively done, then it's your mess. And there's a very big, very big difference between my mess and your mess. And so if we have the ability to have persistent sessions, if we have the expectation that somebody could be spending days in a creative mess that they have as a result of reading a specific set of proceedings, then that's exceptionally important as a distinction.
Yes. Yes, yes, it is. And this is, thank you. Andrew, you have to stay for the next minute. The ability to save and manage workspaces, meaning layouts of the kind you just talked about now, Brandel, is, pardon my honesty, fucking key. It is really, really important. Another really
100%.
important aspect of it is that context is king when it comes to information, obviously. The context that you are needs to be brought into the information. I mean, just look at the people left in this room. Yes, we're all, white males, but our brains are incredibly different. If we cannot have the means through which we can populate our workspace with what augments the way that we access the information, this is an utter failure. So yes, I want to use the 3D as much as we can from a swivel chair, but to start just putting more and more things in to help us understand, to manage these things. I want to be able to literally snap my fingers, and we may have to have a gesture where, okay, let me ask you this, Andrew, and I'm not joking. Do you think, I'm asking Brandel and Andrew at the same time, can the headset recognize a finger snap? Could that be a gesture, for instance, to cycle through views? Can that be done?
Not reliably. You could do it really slowly and it would work.
Brandel,
Finger
say something
tracking's-
else. Have a magic potion for this. Come on.
I'm not writing this for you, so I don't know. I think that the thing that you would be able to look at is when you have we have a thumb and middle finger contact as a characteristic of it, and you have the ability to see that the contact break is being done laterally rather than longitudinally. And so I think that there are characteristics you could look for. I would defer to Andrew in terms of the detectability of that and the strength of that. I think that based on that configuration of fingers, it's likely that they would be detectable, but the quality of anything but the thumb and forefinger is much worse. So yeah.
Well,
Can't we
that's why I
listen to
say
the
if you do it
snap? That'd be easier,
slowly,
wouldn't it?
you'll detect it if it's slow. If you give it enough time to see this pose and figure out what it is. The problem is those three fingers, when you get a bunch of fingers all together in a weird pose, the WebXR hand tracking gets a little bit funky. So I
Let me
think
ask you.
if you do it just right, it might work. But
Okay, let me ask you this then, since you have to go, Andrew. How about you have to raise your hand? A snap can't be low. It has to be in the air.
okay, if you define it specifically, like it has to be like out in front, I can try it, of course, but I think we're gonna get orientation issues if that's okay.
Can't we try to use the speech recognition or audio input to pick up the snap?
We're
I mean,
going
it might be easier to pick up the sound than to visualize the fingers moving.
Well, then, if you're sitting in a university environment, it's going to be a lot of funny sounds. But we're definitely going to be using audio as well, when we can for commands. But the thing is, what today in the middle was really, really difficult meeting. But I'm very grateful that we got through it because we're representing so many different things. One of the things is pure theater to excite people. The other thing is it's got to be useful, right? So this, I think, sits in. Yeah. See you later, Andrew. I look forward to Wednesday. And just send me any update, or is it going to be on your live thing? On your live thing? Live link?
Yeah, I'll just have a special update for you. I'll
Okay,
put it
just
on the server like normal.
thank
It'll just
you.
be an earlier one. It'll probably replace the Wednesday update.
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah, so the thing is, step number one, my brother looks around and goes, wow. That's step number two. And then, of course, once people spend a few minutes, it's as Brandel says, what can I do here? Right? That matters more than anything. And how we end up using the 3D space, I don't know yet as far as the Z dimension is concerned, because very often that gets messy. We'll figure it out. But that's why it's so important to have a few gestures that you learn instantly and they last forever. So the experiment we've been given by Adam with the two hands, I'm so excited by it. Just be able to, some of them spawn. Brandel, you've seen the hand menu in use, right? Have you tried it?
I'll have to go take a look at it.
It's amazing.
I don't recall.
It's so amazing because right now, when you look at it, it's very related to Apple's new look at your hand, you get a dot, right? But it's on the other hand, and it can say something like focus, you touch it and you've done the command. It's so exciting for me because the biggest issue I have with XR is you don't have tactile interfaces. So to make your own hands be the tactile interface, it's freaking brilliant. And amazingly enough, someone sent me a link to a paper on this from a few years ago that's got such bad comments. People just didn't get it. I guess they didn't live in XR enough to feel that no, this is brilliant.
One thought to help with move the thing forward about this sort of transition of getting from presenting a sort of binding of documents to doing something is probably what we need to do is to actually build some actions, some required actions, some tests into the use case. In the sense that, bye, Brandon. If that was your
Who's leaving? Oh, Peter. Okay, yeah. See you on Wednesday, Peter.
Oh, sorry. Bye, Peter. Yeah, because I think that might help unlock some things. What was in my mind earlier when I was talking about the sort of what are you going to do is I'm thinking that one of the things that's naturally in my mind is how is this going to be easier and more useful than using something like a 2D map where you move things around, which is why I was thinking back to something that was less menu driven, but I totally take the point that we do have this constraint about actually what you can, despite having all this, there is some constraint about what we can reliably do in signaling intent. So perhaps one of the things we need to move into our use case is to sort of say, right, look at this, filter for the following things, and then put those things to one side. So that's one of the things, sort of things that I envisage that you will want to do when reading that. And that will force us to actually move from the mental understanding, of which we'll probably all have a slightly different one, to an actually thing that we can make vaguely testable. I think that might actually help move us forward a bit. We've got enough built now that we can iterate on that. So I don't think it's that we have to go and make something completely new, but I do sense. This is why I think we got bogged down in the metadata, because actually we're not actually doing something. We're talking about what we might do rather than what we do. So I think we need to do something with this data set we've decided to use, and pick some things that we have to do with it, and see if we can actually pull that out.
Yeah. So on that, there's one thing on that, and then there's one brief other thing. We have been looking at the hand menu. I think it's really, really useful if everybody designs their own hand menu to see where the overlaps are, so we inspire each other. I currently have the Palm as being the workspace, so don't look at that too much. But yes, I agree with you, Mark. It's time to find a few specific actions that should be mapped on.
Because the thing I naturally find myself want to do is to see that list and say, right, those are the ones I want to read, those are the ones I want to review. And I don't think we have a mechanism, even so if I've got 40 things, I've got to go through possibly two menu selections to triage. That's 3, 4, so that's 12.
That's what you mean from your fingers?
So because the key thing, so when you're doing the triage, is what I've noticed people comment that yes, I can do that, I can lift in, but then you're going off down a single passage. What's been missed is that when you're just trying to triage, I think is the right term for it. You've got a list of say 40 items.
Yeah, no.
And the thing is, what you actually want to do is using the contingent information you have, you want to end up effectively with 3 separate piles or 4 separate piles, whatever your sort is. But an easy starting one would be to sort of now, later, and never, in simplistic terms. And I'm not sure how we get towards that.
Okay, the way that we get towards it currently with current thinking is based on annotations in the loosest sense of it, where on your finger, one finger is annotate, and you can literally have only 3 submenus if you want. Right, so one of them, because the annotation menu won't necessarily be the same if you're on different views. If you're reading, yes, see you later, Rob. If you're reading, it may be different from when you're in proceedings, right? So, was Brandel who left? Okay. Sorry, I saw Rob waving. So, right. So the point is that please draw out the menus and don't make these assumptions, because it's really, really hard to figure out where things should go if it's just in your head. So,
What I was trying to do is but what I really, really want to do, because it's an XR space, is to actually move the document rather than fiddle around with the menu. Because
I understand that, but the thing is, how moving is shaky and not necessarily brilliant. So that's one of the constraints, right? But there's no reason you shouldn't be able to select something and move it if we can, right? But then you have 3 columns. One of them, you said, would be never. So the never is probably best if you just annotate, hide, and it goes away.
Well, I wasn't being that absolute. I mean, in the sense that it's more that
I'm not saying delete it, but you're saying that here's a document you're not interested in, so you hide it for now, right? So it goes away. You don't need a column of documents you're not interested in. But the point, my bigger point,
because you normally need to iterate more than once, so you won't just. You probably won't do it just the once, because by the time you've hidden, then you have to remember to unhide them to see whether you actually meant to put them in the right thing. It's more that if I had these as, for sake of argument, if I had them on a 2D map as 40 little blocks, I would move them roughly, and I don't even care whether they're in a list. What I'm actually doing is doing what you do in the mind's eye, which is to move them, which theoretically we can do in it. That's one of the nice things about the XR environment. So I put those ones there, and it goes back to thinking that the blue ones are not the green ones, and the green ones are not the red ones. What blue, red, and green actually mean, I don't necessarily know. The only thing I know is that they're different from one another, and this is one of the things. I mean, this is where the sort of spatial maps that are the likes of tools like Tinbox are extremely powerful, because they allow for this sort of thinking, and it's something at the moment that I think we're overlooking. I totally take the point about the difficulties of selection and ambiguity over input. But if I can select something enough to do something with the menu, I can select.
No, but Mark, but there's no reason in the view we have today, we can't literally have a button underneath here, or 3 buttons for different annotations to quickly have them accessed, and they move to the right or to the left or something like that.
Yeah, but I understand that, but that's solving a different problem. That's using a different metaphor to the one I'm quite explicitly making, which is that's to make an annotation, I have to decide what the categories are. One of the things that the human brain seems to be good at is just doing this loose sorting, where we don't know what the categories are. We just simply know that things are disjoint. We want to put them apart. So the problem that I see with the annotation method is you've got to start making decisions. So you're back in the premature formalization point. You're deciding before you know what the categories are. You don't know what the categories are. You just know that, well, you might know I want 3 bins. You might not know. This is the other thing, when often you're doing sorting this, the fluidity of working on something like a map space, and indeed an XR, is that you just don't know. What you do know is you have this, and you know it's more like this one than that one. So you might find
I understand that, but this is a little bit late in the game, because we're having...
Well, no, I've said this. I've been saying this for a year. It's just no one's been listening to me.
We've had a column view for months, and the reason we've had a column view is partly because selecting and moving is hard in XR.
But we were able to pull things out of the column view. I don't know when that stopped then.
No, we haven't. No, that's the background elements we can move anywhere we want.
But the list, so I can take something that's in the list and move it out of the list elsewhere.
Not
so if I'm looking at my list, because one of the other useful things is as I move them out of the list, I have an immediate tellback of how much more there is to do. So if I've done all 40 items, so there's nothing left in the list. If I've done 20, the list is now 20 long. So again, I have a visual tellback of the distance through the task that I am.
But Mark, we do have that. It's called focus. It lifts it out. And when you then have it out, you can move it to the side. That we do have in the design.
Okay, well, I think we should do those as an actual ordered practice, and so one of the things I think that I'm sensing we need to step forward is to actually doing some deliberate things. So at the moment we've built some design, we can look at it, and we've been talking about it theoretically. I think the next thing is to effectively have some not scripted steps so much, said your aim is to get to this point. So here, take this stuff. Your job is to find these papers or find 4 that you like amongst there and put them in a separate place to everything else. Because I think only that way can we actually properly work through whether they, that's not the matter whether it works. I mean, they all work. The question is whether they actually use what XR offers us to give the enjoyment and excitement that we're looking for.
Hang on. Okay, I've written that down. I'll see if I can act on it, but I wanted to show you something else to get your opinion.
Sure. Yeah.
So this is author, as you know very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I have given up author development for Vision for the time being because there's too many bugs.
Yeah.
I just don't have the money. So I'm going to try to make author much more useful for Mac first. So here I am on my 27-inch screen, which is probably the same as what you're looking at now, right?
Yeah, I'm at 24. Same, basically, yeah.
Yeah. So the column width shouldn't be too wide unless you're doing a specific edit, obviously. And so I've been fighting. I've been fighting with the whole notion of where to put the table of contents outline and notes. So you could before put notes on the margin. Anyway, let me not talk forever. This is what I've decided. So this is what we're doing. When you mouse over the margins, on the right, you have the outline, which will include structure text. On the left, you will have just another document that happens to be locked to this one.
Yep.
So you can write your notes, you can paste citations, you can do whatever the heck you want. They're slightly grayer than the main text. And when you mouse away from them, they disappear. So you still have your writing area.
Yeah, I like this. I mean, I think the one thing that will probably come out of this, and I'll go back to sort of Dee's comment about it being too dim. So there'll be in a sense, you can set something that's going to work, that's nice and aesthetically works for a large number of people. But for a number of others, there probably will be insufficient contrast. So they might need to either change the tint, the color of it, or the intensity just to get enough contrast. Sorry, it's an implementational detail, but I only note it to stop somebody saying, "Oh, well, that won't work because you can't see it as X." I don't think for the main user. The other thing I think you may find is that if you're in a document and you're doing as much annotation as you are reading, you probably will want the notes to be a bit stronger. But again, if you're able to vary that when you have the need, rather as you allow people to change the color of the background, I think that's a richness yet to be discovered. But I like the basic idea, and you're taking up this idea of basically having broadly a fixed reading width, whether it's user configurable or not, but a fixed width. So in other words, when you embiggen the text, it doesn't just go off the side of the screen. You just get basically, because the main reason you make it bigger is to make it more readable to you, or less eye strain, or whatever. But in other words, so you're not asking for it to go poster size. You're really asking to make the text easier to see.
Yeah, exactly. Look forward to lunch tomorrow and XRing.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.
See you then. Bye.